80,000 soldiers and nearly 2,000 tanks took over every Polish city in a single night. Phone lines went dead and mail was opened by government spies. Even the favorite Sunday morning cartoon for children was replaced by a military general in dark glasses. This was life in Poland, starting December 13th, 1981. We are exploring the reality of growing up under martial law, the day the rooster remained silent. If you were a child in Poland during the early 80s, your week always centered on one specific moment. It was Sunday morning at 9 o'clock. Every child in the country would sit in front of the television waiting for a show called Teleranek. It was a joyful program that started with a cartoon rooster. But on December 13th, 1981, the rooster never showed up. Children across the nation stared at screens filled with nothing but gray snow and white noise. Some families saw a serious man in a green uniform instead. This was General Wojciech Jaruzelski. He wore thick, dark glasses, and his voice was very cold. He told the people that the country was now under military rule. For a child, this was the first time the world felt truly broken. You might have seen your father looking out the window at a massive tank parked in your street. These were real machines of war, with soldiers standing beside them. The silence was the scariest part. Usually the morning would be full of the sounds of neighbors and traffic, but that Sunday, the air felt heavy and still. Do you remember asking your parents why the cartoons were gone? Many parents could not even find the words to explain what was happening because they were just as terrified as you were. A country cut off from the world. The military did not just take over the television stations. They cut the phone lines in every house and public booth. If your grandmother lived in another city, you had no way of knowing if she was safe. You could not call for a doctor or even check on your friends next door. The government did this because they were afraid people would talk to each other and organize protests. When the phones finally started working again weeks later, things were different. Every time you picked up the receiver, a woman's voice would interrupt you. She would say 2 words in Polish that meant the call is being controlled. This was a constant reminder that someone was listening to every single word you said. People learned to speak in codes. You would never say anything bad about the government. Instead, you would talk about the weather or simple things. Even your mail was not private. Every letter was opened by people called censors. They would use thick black ink to cover up sentences they did not like. Sometimes they would stamp the envelope with a mark that said it had been checked. It was a strange feeling to know that a stranger was reading your cards and notes before they reached your family. Finding something to eat became a full-time job for every family. The stores were almost completely empty. If you walked into a grocery shop, you might only see rows of vinegar bottles and nothing else. The government introduced something called ration cards. These were small pieces of paper divided into tiny squares. Each square was for a different item like meat or sugar or butter. Children were given their own cards too. A special card allowed a child to have a small amount of candy or chocolate each month. It was usually just 250 grams. That is about the size of 2 large candy bars. You had to make that last for 30 whole days. Most kids would take 1 tiny bite and save the rest for later. If you lost your ration card, your family would not get any more food for that month. It was a very big responsibility for a child to keep track of those little slips of paper. Because the lines were so long, children were often used as placeholders. Your mother might wake you up while it was still dark and tell you to stand in a line for bread or meat. You would stand there for hours in the cold, and then your mother would come and switch places with you so you could go to school. Sometimes people would stand in line for days just to buy a washing machine or a pair of shoes. There were even professional standers you could hire to stay in line for you. It was a world where waiting became a way of life, and a single orange at Christmas felt like a miracle. While the regular stores were gray and empty, there was one place that felt like a different universe. These shops were called Puex. When you stepped inside, you could smell things that did not exist anywhere else in Poland. It was the smell of real coffee and expensive chocolate and laundry detergent from the West. Puex had the toys every child dreamed of, like Lego sets and Matchbox cars and Barbie dolls. But there was a problem. You could not buy these things with Polish money. You needed American dollars or special government coupons. Most families did not have any dollars unless they had a relative living in another country who sent them gifts. For most Polish children, a trip to Puex was just for looking. You would press your face against the glass and stare at the colorful boxes. Because these Western items were so rare, kids became collectors of trash. If you were lucky enough to get a can of Coca-Cola, you would not throw the empty can away. You would wash it out and put it on a shelf in your room like a trophy. You would save the colorful wrappers from chewing gum and flatten them out between the pages of your books. If you were over 13 years old, you had to carry an official ID card at all times. If a soldier stopped you on the street and you did not have your ID, you could be in serious trouble. Teachers were checked to make sure they were loyal to the military government. If a teacher was found to be a supporter of the opposition, they could lose their job immediately. But students found ways to fight back in secret. Many kids started wearing a tiny metal part from old radios called a resistor. In the Polish language, the word for this part is opornik. It sounds very similar to the word for someone who resists. By pinning this little piece of metal to your sweater, you were telling everyone that you did not agree with the military rule. Teachers would often tell students to take them off, but the kids would just hide them and put them back on later. There were other ways to make fun of the leaders too. A famous story tells of a young girl who drew a penguin in her class book. To an outsider, it was just a bird. But everyone in Poland knew that the penguin represented General Jaruzelski. They said he looked like a penguin because of his stiff uniform and the way he walked. The school leaders were so angry about the drawing that they almost kicked her out of school. It was a time when a simple drawing or a piece of metal could be seen as a crime against the state. The coldest winter ever. The winter of 1981 was not just hard because of the army. It was one of the coldest winters in the history of the country. People called it the winter of the century. The snow was so deep that it reached the tops of the cars and buried entire streets. There was not enough coal to heat the houses, and the electricity was turned off for hours every day to save energy. Families would huddle together in one room to stay warm. You would wear your heavy winter coat and a hat inside your own home. When the power went out, everything would go pitch black. You would have to use candles to see and to cook. People would also place a single candle in their window at night. This was a silent sign of hope. It showed that you were thinking of the people who had been taken away to prison. Even the President of the United States asked Americans to light a candle for Poland that Christmas. The flickering light in the window was a small way to say that the people were still brave and they were still waiting for freedom. A silent protest in the windows. The government used the television to tell lies. They would show the news every evening and tell everyone that life was getting better and that the people were happy. But the people knew the truth. They saw the empty shelves and the soldiers on the corners. They decided to protest in a way the soldiers could not stop. In many cities, at exactly 7:30 in the evening, thousands of people would turn their television sets around. They would make the screens face the window, and then they would go for a walk outside. If you walked down the street at that time, you would see hundreds of glowing boxes facing the world. It was a way of saying that nobody was watching the government news. The police were very frustrated by this. How can you arrest someone for taking a walk or for turning their TV around? It was a clever and peaceful way to show that the people were not being fooled. Children would walk with their parents in the cold air and see the flickering lights from the windows. It was a moment of community and strength in a time of fear. It taught children that you do not need a weapon to stand up for what is right. Growing up under martial law meant you had to learn very quickly how to survive in a gray world. You learned which neighbors might be government spies and which ones would share their food with you. Families became very close because they had to rely on each other for everything. If one family had extra potatoes, they would leave them at the door of the family living downstairs. Children did not have many toys, but they had a lot of imagination. They played games with pebbles and pieces of wood. They learned the value of every single thing they owned. A pair of sneakers was not something you threw away. You would fix them and wear them until they fell apart, and then you would give them to a younger child. Life was not about what you could buy, but about how you could help the person next to you. This period of Polish history finally ended in 1983, but the people who grew up during those years were changed forever. They carried the lessons of resilience and courage into their adult lives. They remember the sound of the tanks and the taste of the chocolate-like products. They remember the silence of the phones and the light of the candles. But most of all, they remember that even when the world tried to make them silent, they found a way to be heard.